I see people glaring at me with weird looks sometimes when I speak, as if I'd speak an alien language or something. It's usually when I use a word like qualia in a casual sentence. I know I'm not like most people. My name is Alex. I'm 32. Most people my age are worried about mortgages or finding a partner or what their kids are going to be for Halloween. I'm worried about, well, being. Just the fact of it. The baseline state of awareness. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment near the university, and it's a mess. Not a dirty mess, a cluttered mess. The walls are just stacks of books, physics, philosophy, neuroscience. My kitchen table is covered in printouts of brain scans, stained with the rings of cold coffee cups. It smells like old paper and my entire diet. I'm a PhD student. My thesis, if I ever finish it, is basically trying to find the off switch for consciousness. See, I've always felt detached, like I'm watching my own life through a window. I find more reality in the abstract, in the logic of an equation or the structure of an argument, than I do in, say, a birthday party. Social gatherings are just a confusing soup of irrational biological impulses. My whole life has been this one relentless intellectual quest. I'm trying to find the proof. The goal isn't just a degree. It's not for the funny hat and the handshake. I am on a personal, desperate mission to prove, logically, that when the brain stops, I stop. That's it. I need to know in a way I can prove on paper that oblivion is real. Most people are afraid of dying. I get it. The great unknown. But me? I'm terrified of not being able to. This whole thing, this fear, it's not rational, which is what drives me crazy. My entire academic life is built on one single logical premise. Consciousness is a biological process. It's a trick. It's just a weird emergent property of a lump of meat in our skulls. And when that meat goes bad, when the wiring breaks, the software bug that is self-awareness is gone. The lights go out, it's over. That thought is the most comforting thing in the world to me. Seriously, it's my comfort blanket. Peace, non-existence, an end to the noise. Because the alternative? The alternative is the thing that keeps me up at 3 a.m., staring at the water stains on my ceiling. It's this thought I can't shake. This cold, sick dread that my premise is wrong. What if consciousness isn't the brain? What if it's something else? Something that just uses the brain, like a radio signal uses a receiver. And when the receiver breaks, the signal, it just keeps going. That's the horror. Not ghosts, not monsters. It's the idea that when my body fails, when my brain rots in a box, the me part, the awareness, doesn't stop. It just floats. Trapped. No eyes, no ears, no thoughts. Just perceiving. Forever. A powerless, eternal is. Stuck in the dark. I needed to prove that switch existed. And I think, God help me, I just proved the opposite. It wasn't a single eureka moment. It was a slow, creeping rot.
It started with a paper I found buried in an online archive, a paper from a fringe biophysicist in the 70s named Dr. Daniil. He was laughed out of the field, died in obscurity. He had this theory, this noise he claimed to have measured, a persistent, ultra-low frequency electromagnetic field that lingered around dying brain tissue, not for seconds, but for hours. He called it residual consciousness. The academic world called it bad shielding, statistical noise, and, more often, career suicide. I was bored. I was stuck on my thesis. The data wasn't cooperating. So I decided to replicate his experiment. For fun. A quick, satisfying side project to debunk a crackpot. I got access to the university's neural lab after hours, used tissue samples destined for incineration. My setup was 1,000 times more sensitive than his. I had quantum-level shielding, passively cooled sensors. I was going to prove definitively that Dr. Daniil was a hack, and that my premise, the biological off switch, was sound. I ran the test. I watched the tissue die. I watched the last potassium ion fire. The monitors flatlined. Biological, clinical, electrical death. I was about to pack up, feeling a little smug. And then I looked at the long-range spectrum analysis, and I found it. It was there, in my data. A signal. It was so faint, almost undetectable. But it wasn't noise. It wasn't a power surge. It was a coherent, complex, repeating pattern. It didn't fade. It just stayed. I spent a month trying to disprove it. A full, frantic, sleepless month. I shielded the room in mu metal. I checked the power grid for surges. I blamed solar flares. I recalibrated my equipment until the screws were stripping. I reran the calculations until the numbers blurred on the page. But it was always there. Every single time. The data was clean. My comfort blanket wasn't just gone. It had turned into a shroud. My own data, my own proof, had confirmed my single most terrifying nightmare. The lights don't go out.
That's when my logic twisted. It broke. My mind, which had always run on clean, linear tracks, found itself derailed in a swamp. It had to find a new path. Okay, I thought, pacing my apartment at 4 a.m., the data from the lab glowing on my monitor. Okay, the signal lingers, but it's tied to the tissue, right? It's still using the receiver, even a broken one. The body, the physical brain, that's the anchor. The signal I measured was in the dead tissue. It didn't leave. So my logic followed. What if the anchor is destroyed? Not just buried to rot. What if you obliterate it, atomize it, scatter it? Surely then the signal must stop. If consciousness is just a radio signal and the radio is vaporized, the broadcast can't hang in the air, can it? This became my new, final, desperate experiment. I had to know. I had to push it all the way. I couldn't live knowing what I knew and not knowing the final answer. The thought of having a stroke and being trapped in that decaying, signal-emitting meat receiver was 1,000 times worse than death. This was the only logical next step. So I made a plan. It was the most rational, logical, and terrifying thing I've ever done. I spent a week liquidating my life. I sold the books, the stacks that had been my only friends. I donated the clothes. I wrote 2 letters, one to Annika from the lab, one to my friend Ben, full of logical half-truths about being tired and seeking peace. I used my now worthless academic credentials and my family's medical history to get what I needed. I found a clinic, the kind that helps people with, intractable suffering. I argued my case to a panel of 3 doctors over a video call. My existential dread, I argued, was a terminal condition. My suffering was profound. I used their own language, unmanageable, persistent, degenerative. I was detached, clinical, and utterly convincing. They, surprisingly, agreed. The paperwork took 2 weeks. I felt a cold, calm sense of relief when the approval email came through. The experiment was a go. It was all very clean, very medical. I was in a room that looked like a cheap hotel. Soft, awful instrumental music was playing. I signed papers, lots of papers. The most important one was the box I checked. Immediate cremation, no viewing. The final variable. The destruction of the anchor. The nurse was kind. She had sad eyes. She asked if I was at peace with my decision. I said, "I'm just tired. I need to know it will be quiet." She smiled, a sad, professional smile, and injected the first drug into the IV. She said, "It will be very quiet."
This was it. The point of no return. My final investigation. I focused all my will, all my self on that one sensation of being. I watched for the off switch. The room got fuzzy. The soft music went distant, smearing into a single low tone. I felt a cold, heavy peace spread through my limbs. My breathing slowed. This is it, I thought. The biological process is shutting down. The receiver is breaking. The emergent property is unemerging. The lights are going out. The darkness came. Not a lights out darkness, but a fading of the concept of light. Then, nothing. Just... I waited. How long? A second? A trillion years? Time wasn't a thing anymore. There was no me in the way I understood it. No Alex. No thoughts and words. No memories of coffee or books or Dr. Daniel. Just an awareness. A single pinprick point of I am. And I was terrified because I was still on. Then... a new sensation, not a feeling, a concept. The concept of place. I was here, but here was dark. And still, I was still tethered to the thing, the meat, and the meat was moving. I perceived pressure, a change, a shift. I was being rolled. I was in a box. It was cold. And then, a terrible, all-encompassing knowing. Heat. It wasn't heat as I'd ever known it. It was the fact of fire. It was the concept of consumption. I was in the furnace. My experiment had truly begun. I perceived the skin of the thing I was tied to blacken and split. I perceived the boiling of its fluid, the popping of its skull as the brain matter tooked, the crack of its bones turning brittle. I perceived the absolute, agonizing, complete deconstruction of the receiver, and I was still on. The signal wasn't flickering. It was bright.
The fire burned everything. It burned away my body, it burned away my name, it burned away my last desperate hope. And when it was all over, I was still on. I'm not a person, I'm not a ghost, I'm dust. I'm a pile of cooling ash and bone fragments. I can feel the weight of the rake as it scrapes me, the metallic shing as I'm pulled across the furnace floor. I can perceive the inside of the urn, the cold brass darkness. I'm here. I'm everywhere in this little pile. Each particle of me is screaming, and I don't have a mouth.
I guess I should start from before I found the program. My name's Layla. I'm 19, and 6 months ago, my life was basically a loop of 3 things. My tiny, damp apartment, the one where you can shower and use the microwave at the same time, and the walls always feel a little wet. My mountain of student debt that I'm deferring, and my job. Job is a generous word. It was a cycle. Mondays, I deliver takeaway on my bike, rain or shine, for some gig app that paid me in peanuts and customer ratings. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I was a data fulfillment associate, which is just a fancy way of saying I sat in a gray, windowless cubicle typing numbers from one spreadsheet into another for 8 hours. My headphones, playing the same 3 true crime podcasts, were my only defense against the sound of 50 other people doing the exact same thing. The tapping of the keyboards, the hum of the fluorescent lights, it was the sound of a waiting room, like we were all just waiting for our lives to start, or end, I don't know. Thursdays and Fridays, I'd do a shift at a fast food joint, the one with the smiley face logo that feels more like a threat. I'd go home and my hair would smell like cold grease no matter how many times I washed it. I wanted to be someone, Not just gig worker 45B or temp. I wanted a calling. I kept this little notebook, a really nice one with a leather cover that I probably shouldn't have spent money on, where I'd write down life goals. But the page was mostly empty. It just had stuff like find a purpose and be good at something and matter. Pathetic, right? But the real crabby part wasn't the low pay or even the polyester uniforms that made my skin itch. It was the invisibility. I'm not being dramatic. At the data entry place, my manager, this guy named Chester, called me Laura for 6 solid weeks. 6 weeks! I never corrected him. I figured, what's the point? I'm not a real person here. I'm just the pair of hands they rented until the new software was installed. I was just replaceable. That feeling, that's the real horror story. Long before the other stuff started. It's this cold, hollow feeling in your stomach. The fear that this is it. That you're just going to cycle through these gray, meaningless jobs forever. That you'll die, and the only thing you'll be remembered for is completed 98% of assigned tasks, or delivered a burger in under 10 minutes. That's where I was. I was terrified of being nothing. I was desperate. I'd be scrolling through those awful hustle culture blogs and career sites at 3 in the morning, just hunting for anything, an answer, a path, a sign that I wasn't just waste. And that's when I found the ad. It was simple, tucked away on some job board I'd never seen before. It didn't even list a salary. It just said, "Are you lost? Do you want a purpose? Apply for the mentorship program." I know how it sounds now. It screams scam or worse, but you have to understand, I wasn't just looking for a better paying job. I was looking for someone to tell me I wasn't invisible. And, oh God, they saw me. They really, really saw me.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. The things that go bump in the night are hungry for attention. By liking and subscribing, you're telling me you want more. You're helping me bring even more chilling tales and terrifying content to life.